Hey comrades, hope you're doing well. We're gonna start watching KonoSuba, but not the first two seasons. If you go back on most of my channels, I want to say, I reviewed season 1 and 2 back a year ago or something, and back when I was doing individual episode reviews. So you can check those out if you want. If you don't care. The gist of KonoSuba is it's like an isekai anime. Well, it's literally an isekai animation, so it's like, but it kind of makes fun of all the tropes of isekai anime as well as other anime. So it's a joke anime, and it's pretty good. I would say I laughed out loud a lot. It's got 2 seasons, a movie, and then like a side series about one of the characters, Megumin. And I'll kind of review each one of them briefly. So the main cast is Kazuma. Kazuma is the guy who got isekai'd into this world. And when he got isekai, you know, it's normal, like you get like one wish, one thing you can bring with you. And he's like, I want to bring you to like the goddess Aqua. And so she was like, the fuck? And then they both got pulled into this world. And then she still has like her powers, but her powers are kind of lame. They're mostly party tricks. She likes to drink. She's lazy. She treats Kazuma poorly. He treats her poorly. It's, you know, hilarity ensues. It's pretty good. It's fun. And she's my favorite of the trio, hands down. But then she has a cult in this world called the Cult of Axis, and they're crazy, and they are all about like getting them converts and stuff. And so there's like run-ins with them periodically as well. But she's dumb, and like literally like she's kind of dumb in the head, and a drunk, and the whole shebang. Kazuma is also kind of a drunk, and he's also dumb. He's like the most rational of like all of the main cast, but he's also completely like irrational most of the time. He's just kind of crazy and like fed up with shit and doesn't want to do anything and just wants to like have money and chill in his life. But his like skill, he doesn't have any superpowers or good skills. His only good talent is luck, like in most video games, which is what this is making fun of. The luck skill like virtually is nothing. It's like sometimes you get better item drops and stuff, and so he specializes in being a thief, and then, you know, but it's still kind of like he's a really good thief, but that's all he can really do. But he's got some other skills he's like developed over time. And then there's Darkness. Darkness is a masochist or a sadomasochist, as in she gets sexual pleasure from being like attacked. And she's like a cavalier, I think is what they're called in this world, or I think she's a crusader. So she's like a paladin without the healing magic. So she's defense, and she loves being like attacked and mistreated, and all that it really gets her hot and bothered. And there's like some instance where this is all based on a light novel, but there is some romantic stuff that goes on between Darkness and Kazuma at some point, like a little bit. I think the main love interest for this whole series is the next girl, generally. I haven't read the light novel series. It's one of those things where it's like, I hear it's good. I just like haven't gone around to it. Anyway, so that's Darkness. She comes from like a very aristocratic family, like very up in the nobles and all that stuff. And then there's some issues. She like doesn't like that lifestyle or whatever. And it's like Lalatina is her actual name. But she's not a princess, but she's like a duchess or something. But she like ran away to be an adventurer and do all that stuff. And then that last one is Megumin. Or Megumi. It's Megumi. Megumin. I think Megumin is the cat she has. So Megumi, she's like a lowly character. So Darkness has giant breasts. Aqua's like in the middle. She's got a nice ass and then like decent breasts. Darkness is like thick, right? She's got nice, like a huge tits and then a huge nice ass. And she's tall and blonde. Aqua's got blue hair. And then Megumi has like short black hair. I think it's short. And she's a loli, right? But her and Kazuma have like the best relationship. They still like fight and there's still craziness, but there's definitely seems to be something going on there. Somewhat. She's from a tribe. I can't remember exactly what they're called. Like the Demon Fire Tribe, Fire Demon Tribe or something like that. And they're all spellcasters, but they're spellcasters like a Japanese middle school kid, where it's all like a lot of dramatic prose and all this stuff. And Megumi's whole thing too is like she fell in love with like explosion magic, which you're looking at like Dungeon or Dragon Quest kind of games, like explosion is like the best magic in the game, right? But in this world, it's like a giant explosion, and when she only uses it like once a day, and then she falls asleep or she passes out. So she gets like a one shot, but it's super powerful, and so that's like hilarity ensues there. And they've been able to defeat like multiple. There's a demon king in this world, and he's very far away. They never left like the initial town or whatever because they don't want to, because they're all lazy. But they go on like little adventures around here and there, and they went and like saved the fire demon or the fire devil tribes city at some point. They've killed they defeated I think they've killed I think they've killed 2 demon king generals. They're friends with 2 other ones. One of them they converted over, and one left of her own volition. Named Wiz, who's another thick. She's a lich, I think. And then there's Dullahan, who they're both Wiz and Dullahan run shops in this town and just kind of hang out. And then there's Yun, who's Megumi's best frenemy, and she shows up, and then she's got a nice rack too, which Megumi hates. And then at some point she wanted to marry Kasuma and have children because of the fire tribe thing. Anyway. There's various other sexual exploits and stuff. It's not a main theme, but it's one of the things that keeps coming up. Is Kasuma's non-ability into having sex. But there's a succubus lounge that he attends periodically, and then when he tries to steal things from women, he often steals panties, and it's hilarity ensues. Anyway, the show's pretty funny. It's entertaining. It's pretty good. The cast meshes well, and the story is interesting, and it's very good. It's a very good isekai period, but it also is funny because it plays on a lot of tropes, and not just isekai tropes, but general fantasy anime tropes, otame games, harem games or harem shows. A lot of stuff. It kind of plays with a lot of tropes, and it does a pretty good job, I would say, most of the time. So it's very good. It's an A+ all around. So if you're hearing all that and you haven't seen anything else or anything else KonoSuba, but you like anime and you like laughing, I would say go watch the first 2 seasons and the movie. And the 3rd season's out here, clearly. I mean, I torrent everything, so. I would assume Crunchyroll or High Five has it. No, I think High Five has exclusive for Is It Okay to Date a Girl in a Dungeon, if that's still around. But I'd be surprised if Crunchyroll or Amazon or somebody didn't have all these seasons you can just go watch if you have their subscription service or whatever. Or you could just find it online. Like a smart person. But you do you. Okay, so go ahead. It's already 7 minutes in, but go ahead, share, subscribe, comment, and we're gonna get into it. So the first episode opens up, and Kasuma has PTSD from this chimera who tried to rape and kill him from the previous season. Or that's the hard thing. Yeah, I mean it's the previous season. Anyway, and so he's I'm done. I can't get girls. I'm having all this trouble. I'm just what's the point? I'm constantly in danger. I'm getting raped. I don't like it. I don't like any of this stuff. I'm going to join a faith and just become a monk and live in a monk. And then Aqua, who has a church, she's oh, can we at least tell you on the access call? And she's shut the fuck up. That's what got me in trouble in the first place. So then he's very determined, and all the rest of the girls no, Kasuma, why? And so he starts storming off to the nearest monastery, and the girls are following, and they're trying to talk. And at some point, Megumi gets super mad because he calls her a loli, and she blows everybody up with her explosion magic. And so then they're camping out that evening, and he's oh, those dumb girls, I could have been there already. And Aqua and Darkness are passed out, so Megumi and him are just sitting next to each other, and she's holding his hand, and he's getting ooh, what does this mean? Should I do something? What should I do? Does she really want me to stay? Because she's trying to convince him to stay. She likes the life they have, and she's enjoying everything, and it's she has a group of friends for the first time, and she doesn't want to mess that up, or yada 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 yada. Some real manipulative shit, if you ask me. But anyway, he's about to make a move, because the best thing about Kasuma is that he's bold and he doesn't give up. And then she's asleep, and he's fuck. Anyway, so the next day he's yeah, because he's oh yeah, maybe I will stay, maybe we can, something, and then she's asleep, and he's man, fuck you guys. So the next morning he's continuing his trek to be a monk, and then they pass this crazy looking monster that looks all beat up, or this girl, elf girl looking thing that's all beat up, and they're oh my gosh, we have to help her. And then Cosmo's I'm pretty sure that's a monster. He has one of his abilities is Sixth Sense or monster detection, and then he pulls out a strategy guide, essentially, what is it called, an atlas or whatever, and he starts reading about this exact monster, where it's a plant monster that pretends to be injured or innocent, and then it gets people real close, and then it will lure them into a sense of security, and then it drags them down into the ground and eats them with their plant powers. Anyway, so Kasuma keeps talking about killing it, and then Thing keeps talking and tricking them, and eventually he just storms off, and the girls storm off with him because he doesn't have the courage to actually go through with it. And he's whatever, it's a monster. And then at some point he's oh, I have an idea. I'm gonna go convince the monster not to stop eating people because of something she said, and then I can just bring her food from the monastery, and that way she doesn't have to feed on the local populace. So he goes back over, and he sees her just practicing her voice and practicing what she was saying, and being a real laughing about eating humans and all this stuff, and tricking them and all that stuff, and he gets super mad, so then he obviously kills her. But she was feasting on somebody under the ground, and she pulls that person up before he shows up and like kills him. And this guy had like a little mallet, and so he's like all right, back to the monastery. So he's walking back, and then Aqua's like, what the fuck, where'd you get that mallet? And he's like, oh, I just found it. And they start fighting over it, and the mallet like creates gold pieces when they like shake it, and he's like, woo. And so they all head back to the town because he just wants to live like a posh life, and he's like, now I can do it, this is gonna be great. And they're talking all the fun things they're gonna do, and they run into this thief girl, which is the one who originally taught him like thief skills, like in the first episode or two, way back in the first season. And she steals the mallet, and they don't realize it till she's gone, and he's like sad. And so they're back in their like, they live in like a giant mansion, but there's like no furniture or anything. It's kind of, the whole thing's so ridiculous. They earned it doing something, like they won it, or it was like haunted by ghosts, and so no one wanted it, so they got it real cheap. I can't remember exactly what was going on with that, but he's like sad, and Aqua's like laying on the ground, and like she's falling asleep with a bottle, and then they hear like a banging on the door, and so KonoSuba and Aqua like run over and like attack this guy, and it's actually a servant of La Latina's family / Darkness, and she's like, stop it. And so she's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, the family's in a lot of dire straits, and I have a letter that you need to read, and it's important because there's like the family names on the line or something, and Darkness is reading it, and she's like, oh, I better go take care of this all by myself and not tell you guys anything about it. And KonoSuba's like, what's it say? And she's like, I refuse to tell you. You don't want to know anything. You want to just easy life and blah blah blah. And then he's like, nope. So he uses his still abilities to still the note, and it's an invitation from the princess of the kingdom, who's like, oh, KonoSuba, I've heard you defeated 2 demon kings already, and I want to meet you, and yada yada. And he's like, we're going. And then Darkness, it's like, no, you're gonna embarrass, and you're gonna get your head cut off because you're so improper and such a dirtbag and such a scumbag and all this stuff. And he's like, doesn't matter, we're leaving. And Megumi and Aqua are like, yeah, let's do it. KonoSuba starts the episode trying to figure out how to get skis in on the princess. He's looking over the letter some more and kind of figures that she must be younger than him, which is to his advantage. So if he can really like wow her with his stories and whatnot, maybe he can get some action. Anyway, Darkness is there wearing a maid outfit for some reason, and she's very concerned that he's gonna embarrass them and like cause their heads to be cut off or whatever. She's like super concerned about this, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you say yes, my master." And then she says, "Yes, my master, something punish me," right? Because she's a sadomasochist, and then she gets all turned on and stuff. After, next, they're wandering around town, just like chit-chatting about the whole situation, and then what are they doing out in town? Oh, I remember. So they're heading over to Wiz's place. So Wiz is a lich friend of theirs, and her whole deal is that she runs a shop. She used to be part of like the Demon King's army, but then she quit for like the peaceful life, and now she just like chills out and works the shop. KonoSuba, meanwhile, has been trying to bring like modern inventions to this like medieval-based world, even though they got magic. So he, with Megumi and Darkness, and the help of like the Dullahan, which is the mask, I'm pretty sure it's the mask guy, or the mask guy, who was like an ex-member of the Demon King's army that they defeated. He's like a trickster demon. Anyway, they put together this, the lighters, so people can have lighters. They can just like light things with fire, and they don't need flint and stone or whatever. And then, so everyone's getting like free lighters except Aqua, because all she did the whole time was drink and be an asshole. So he's like, maybe you'll get a free lighter if you can get people to come to the shop. So she goes out and she makes a big performance, and it causes a big scene, and people are throwing money at her. And then the mask guy comes over and is yelling at her, and they start fighting. And then Wiz like runs out to actually get people to come to her shop, which KonoSuba is shocked by, because normally Wiz is very, 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 very bad at running a business. So then they start like selling out like crazy, and making tons of money with this. And the mask guy and KonoSuba are talking about how he can get like his 3 million gold pieces, which is what he needs to like finally be at peace with the world. Anyway, later that evening, we and I don't remember exactly what that's about. I remember that was like a point of discussion, but it's been like 2 years almost since I've seen the second season, so I don't exactly remember what that's all about. Anyway, later on, they're all getting dressed up for the princess to be there, and hilarity ensues because Darkness is trying to get Megumi and Aqua like outfits, and she's giving them like outfits from when she was younger, because Aqua's like, again, she's super thick, like giant E-sized breasts and ass, and then Aqua's like a D cup or whatever, like she's decent. So she's like, the outfit that Darkness gave her is like, it's a little big, but it like fits. And then Megumi, the outfit just like straight up falls off because like chest size and butt size, because she's lowly. And then she's complaining about that. And then Darkness is like, oh, I gave you an outfit from when I was like 13. And so they like fight about that, and somehow behind the scenes they finally get like outfits that fit them all. They finally get introduced to the princess. The princess is like this awkward, like younger girl, and she keeps, instead of talking to them directly for the most part, she whispers to like this knight that's standing by her, and then she's got this like mage as well. Anyway, the whole thing's like a complete disaster. They keep like saying offensive or doing offensive things, and then several times like they threaten to like kick him out or do something crazy, and Lalatina has to keep like apologizing and something. Eventually, the princess takes it like a step too far, as in like he's telling the story about how he beat the guy with the cursed knight or cursed sword, which is from like season 1, I want to say, and he's just like some real asshole guy who was walking around thinking he was hot shit, and then Cosmo like stole his sword, and then when he had the sword in his hand, it was like too heavy, so it bonked him on the head and he defeated him. And it's like a famous story now. Plus he's defeated like 2 of the Demon King's like generals and all this stuff. It's all like happenstance or mistakes or like barely doing it and whatnot. So he's like he's trying to tell this story that's like, it's kind of true, but not really true. And then he's, they're asking about where he came from. And at some point it comes out that he's like the weakest class, like he's like a thief. And then like the princess like insults him, and he gets defensive, and then she like insults him again, and then so he's like whatever, and like she dismisses him. So he starts to leave, and then Megumi is like getting super pissed off, like she's holding onto Darkness's hair, like, and this whole time Aqua's like passed out drunk on the table, but Megumi's getting like really mad, right? And she does like very erratic things when she gets upset, like explosion magic in this tiny room, and so Kasuma's like really concerned. But then Megumi just like says something back to the princess, and then the princess says something back to, like, he's not a liar, something, and then she's like whatever, blah 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 blah, and then Darkness goes up and like slaps her in the face essentially for calling him a liar and then the knight tries to attack her, and she just like catches it on her arm because she's such like her stats when it comes to defense are like so freaking high, and she has so many hit points or whatever that she can just like eat it. And then she goes up to the princess, and they have like a cute little conversation where she's like, I apologize for hitting you, but you gotta, like, you can't be calling people liars like when they're not, and like by my honor and the honor of my family, something. And finally the princess is like, okay, I'm sorry. And she apologizes, and then they have like a nice little farewell. They're like, okay, cool. And she's like, you know what, I want to hear more stories from you, so you have to come visit sometime. And he's like, sure, I'll come visit you sometime. And then the princess and her entourage are getting ready to teleport back to like the capital, to do whatever they got to do there, like live. I don't know why I said it like that. Anyway, so she and then Cosmo's like, cool, yeah, we'll have to hang out again sometime. And she's like, how about right now? And so she grabs his hand and drags him through the portal, and he wakes up, and he's in like or he doesn't wake up, he's like, holy shit. So it's him, and then the two on the entourage are like, what? Princess, what did you do? And he's like, ah, because he's all by himself with the princess, and like this crazy castle is in front of him, and he's like, fuck. So what exactly is Kazuma doing at the castle now that he's been kidnapped by the princess? He's acting as her playmate. So the episode starts, and the guard lady comes in, is looking for Kazuma because he can't be found, and he's in telling like lewd stories to the princess, who's loving it. And then the guard tries to do something about it, but then Kazuma knocks her out or something, and he continues. Then we get, most of the episode is just Kazuma hanging out with the princess, and they're like playing chess and running around, and he's telling stories, and they're like using Beyblades or something and all that good stuff. And he's telling her stories and everything, and at some point she's like, you remind me of my older brother, and he's like, excuse me? So he definitely has like a sister con or whatever. He's a sister con, sis con, which means he's he's like a, it's like he gets off on the idea that his younger sister, who's the princess in this hypothetical situation, is in love with him, right? Which is it's a whole genre of things outside of like the Western concept of the incest thing. Anyway, so it's played it for laughs a lot. Not always, but in this day and age, usually it is. Okay, so Kazuma is clearly a siscon. And she calls him older brother, and he's like, yes! Because at a couple points, we find out that the castle is constantly being attacked or sneak attacked by the Demon King's army. And the Kazuma makes a comment about how all these other like Japanese expats, the guys who come from Japan, isekai'd over here, need to like get their act together and do something about it. We haven't met too many of these people. There was a guy... season 2, I want to say, like they found like his journals, and he was creating like a device, and he's just super crazy. Anyway, he created like a whole dungeon system. He essentially became kind of like a bad guy. He was trying to create some sort of thing to like defeat the Demon King, and it ended up going haywire, and then they have to fight it, and it's like a whole thing. Anyway, So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything that noteworthy. Oh, at some point, and Kazuma keeps doing like the Otame game thing where he's like, there's like the stars, and he's like, oh, and it's like his shirt's off, and he's like not rugged, he's like very femininely handsome man. If you ever played an Otame game, you know exactly what's going on with that. But at some point, he just keeps sticking around and hanging out and being a play friend. And the whole thing with the princess is she's so everyone does exactly what she says, and they treat her like a delicate flower. That Kasuma treats her just like a normal girl, essentially, and is kind of lewd and crude and rude. That's she likes having him around because she gets to act like a real girl and all that stuff. So that's cute. At some point, Kazuma's doing his normal, regular, like everyday schedule, and he's like, okay, today I'm gonna hit on the maid, and then he starts, and then it's like Darkness, Aqua, and Megumi. And Darkness like gives him a real hard time, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, master, blah 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 blah. And then the princess walks in, and she's like, what's going on? And Darkness is like, we need to take him back. And he's like, no. And the princess is like, yes, I understand. Let me throw a feast for him before you go. And Kazuma's like, no, my life of luxury and safety is over. And so they have this feast, and while they're there, like Megumi and Aqua are like stuffing their faces and being drunks. And but Darkness is being hit on by all the young men because she's extremely attractive, right? That's been established several times. Extremely beautiful, curvaceous, all that good stuff. And then she's of like a very high noble stock, so she's very like desirable, which is one of the reasons she ran away and became a crusader in the first place, because she didn't want to deal with it. And at some point, this douchebag from like I want to say season 1. From a previous season, he's like this noble guy. They like got into a big fracas with him, and then Cosmo like blew up his house, or summoned a demon to blow up his house or something. And it was like there was like a trial. It was a whole thing. He shows up, and then him and Cosmo like go at it for a little bit, and then guys keep hitting on Darkness, and then Cosmo like starts talking about how they're lovers and all this stuff and being really crude, and so she beats the shit out of him, and then he gets like kicked out essentially. So he's out in the balcony of the castle just being like sourpotamous about the whole situation when Iris, the princess, shows back up, and she's like, oh, I'm gonna miss you so much, I wish I could be an adventurer like you and go have fun and do adventures. And he's like, what do you like about me, about your big brother? And she's like, he's rude and crude and mean and sourpotamous. And he's like, those are all bad things. And she's like, no, they're good things to me. And he's like, oh, my little sister. And then she mentioned something about like a thief that goes around and like steals from the rich and gives to the poor, essentially. And he's like, oh, I have an idea. So he runs in and like asks about it in front of everybody, and they're like, oh yeah, there's this thief. And he's like, I will catch the thief, and we will stay here until they're captured. And Darkness is like, no. And Aqua and Megumi are like, yay, because they get to keep eating delicious foods. And then the princess is like, ooh, and it's like, all right, so we're gonna send you to these like nobles that are getting targeted, and the ones that we think are getting targeted because they're like corrupt and evil. And the first one happens to be the guy that like put him on trial before, and it's like, rah! So the adventure at the I don't call him a bad guy, the guy who was previously done wrong by Kasuma and his crew, is pretty silly. It involves both of them finding like a magic mirror, or the guy has a magic mirror so he can look into like another room, and Kasuma finds him, and it's Darkness's room, and they're like wheeling and dealing to see who gets to look at her like changing and be naked because she's super hot, right? And then she catches them and beats the shit out of both of them. Oh, man. Meanwhile, for like a couple weeks or whatever they're there, Aqua just drinks with the maids and gets plastered, and Megumi just gets... what does she do? She has Kasuma take her out on dates, quote unquote. There's a lot of that kind of more like sexual tension between them in this episode, or at least the beginning. So they go out on dates, which is just her using explosion magic and then him dragging her back after she's passed out. So the usual stuff. And the Darkness is just trying to like cover down for everybody because they're just causing like a mess and not solving any problems. And so finally the guy's like, you know what? I think I'm good. You guys can get the fuck out of here. And so they're getting kicked out, so they gotta head back. On the last night of their like adventures, it's at this guy's mansion. The Kasuma is like wakes up in the middle of the night and goes down for a snack. And while he's down there, he runs into the thief they're actually been looking for this whole time. And it's that chick who stole the hammer from him, who's like the thief he learned thieving from, he stole her panties like the first time he used thieving powers or whatever. Chris, I think is her name. And so she is like, oh, let me tell you why I'm doing this. And he's like, I don't want to know. Just get the fuck out of here and stop stealing from people. Blah, 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 blah. And they go back and forth, back and forth. And eventually he lets her go, but he has her cast binding magic on him so that it looks like he tried his best and then got defeated. So that happens. So when Darkness, Megumi, and Agua find him, he's all tied up. And then at that point, Agua's like, I got a confession to make. I went into your room while you were gone and got hammered and broke some of your stuff. And he's like, okay, I forgive you. Just release me. And then she's like, while we're at it. And then she goes on this tirade about how she broke all this stuff and got hammered and like spilt things and like made a huge mess. And he's like, okay, it's fine. I forgive you. Whatever. Just let me out. And then Darkness and Megumi are like, we actually have some things we want to say too. And he's like, oh, Jesus Christ. Lord, give me strength. And I didn't quite catch it because it was like just women screaming in high-pitched voices, but it seemed like Darkness wanted an apology from him and was like stuffing his mouth with flan, and then Megumi wanted like promises that he would never leave again and that he would help her with explosion magic forever, and he conceded. And because at this point the guy finds him and he's like, the fuck is happening here? So they're out and about, and him and Agua are just having a conversation while she's trying to like buy booze, and the booze here really sucks. And then they have like a back and forth about how like she's really like getting like lovey-dovey eyes from so many guys, and because she's the best, and she's like, whatever, I don't give a fuck. And then he's like, oh yeah, at some point someone brought a whole bunch of meat over, and she's like, meat? I never had any meat. What the fuck happened with that? And he was like, oh, Darkness cooked it, we ate it. And she's like, fuck you. It's a lot of silly fun things. Anyway, later that evening, he's like resting in his room when Chris shows up and like wakes him up, and she's like, let me tell you the story. And he's like, I don't want to hear no fucking stories. And she's like, but it's important. There's all these like mystical ancient artifacts that are like showing up with superpowers, and they need to be gathered together because they're going to cause problems. And Kasuma like thinks about it, and he's like, oh yeah, that's right. Most people when they come here, they get like a mystical artifact, right? Because that's like the deal when you die, all the way back in the first episode, and that's how Aqua's here, is when you go to the goddess and she's going to isekai you to a new world, they're like, what is the one thing you want? And you can, anything you wish for. And you know, it's like, I want a hammer that produces infinite wealth. I want a sword, a cursed sword that does magic, yada, yada, yada. Oh yeah, they run into that guy who had the cursed sword that Agua gave him. And he like gives her like a ring or something, and she's like, oh cool, thanks. It doesn't move my finger, but whatever. Anyway, which he's one of these guys. He's one of these people from like a foreign land who's he's from like Japan, and now he's isekai'd here. So Chris is like, I have a mysterious benefactor who's like getting me to do all this stuff so they can gather him up. And of course, if you're intelligent at all, that sounds like shady as shit. Like, this guy's definitely a bad guy. Could be the Demon King, could be one of his operatives, whatever. It's like, why would you take all these items away from these heroes? Like, you dumb bitch. Anyway, she's like, I need your help. And he's like, no, I'm not going to help you. Get the fuck out of here. She's like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow and we'll talk about how we're going to do it. He's like, no, I'm not going to do it. Get out. And then he like tries to fall back asleep, and then like there's like a trumpet or sound that comes through. Announcing that, like, oh, the Demon King's army is attacking the capital. They need all high-level adventurers to come in. And he's like, oh, whatever, fuck him. And then Darkness comes in and is like, we gotta go. And he's like, what? They said high-level adventurers. Leave me the fuck alone. I'm not going out there. And she's like, fine. Well, I'll go. It's dead. And then he hears, like, Darkness is trying to pull Agua out of her bed. And she's like, I don't want to fucking go. No, I don't want to go. And Megumi's like, wants to go and start casting explosion magic immediately. So Darkness is trying to pull an Aqua and hold Megumi back. And they're just making a lot of ruckus. And Kasuma's like, God, I hate my life so much. It's pretty good. But then he's like, you know what? When I didn't capture that thief, Chris, I got like a chewing out by the princess, and I want to stay here, hang out with her, and just be her playmate in the castle. So maybe if I go and I like win some battles, they'll let me do it. And then he gets like dressed, grabs his bow, and goes, and he's like, all right, we're leaving. And Darkness making me like, yay! And Aqua's like, no! And so the episode ends with them walking towards like the Demon King army, the four of them, and he's dragging Aqua behind him screaming. So the battle with the Demon King's army that's invading the capital begins and ends very quickly as we start off. Kasuma's making a lot of noise, all the guards, and everybody's like, oh, this is the guy who cured this, and that's the guy who killed this guy. And he's like, yes, that is me. And then Aqua's freaking out, and he's like, hey, go just use your holy magic or whatever. Be good. It's just kobolds. You'll be fine. And she's like, you're right, blah, blah, blah. And then Kasuma sees, after like the credits, we just see him sitting in like heaven with Eris. Eris is the goddess that took over the isekaiing for Japanese kids after Agua got pulled into the world per Kasuma's like one request instead of getting like a magical item or whatever. And it's a pretty good scene because they just sit there quietly for like a minute. Because he's like, ooh, I'm in a lot of trouble now because he made promises not to die anymore, not to treat his life haphazardly, any of that stuff. And so she's really mad at him. And then we find out she's mad at him because he's being a pervert, not because he died. And he's like, what? And she's like, yeah, I sent my servant and you assaulted them. You sexually assaulted them. And he's like, who? What's her name? No, I thought she was a boy, so I was grabbing his chest. And she's like super offended because she's got a flat chest and she stuffs, which is like a whole thing that we learn about in like season 2, I want to say. And so he's like, wait, no, I've done blah, 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 blah. And she's like, I don't even care. Listen, I need your help. And we find out that she's the one who's pushing the thief, so it's less nefarious, to gather all these like mystical treasures, all the items that the isekai people take, because there's some of them that are like really dangerous. And there's 2 in particular that she mentions. There's one that you can summon a demon or a monster of some sort, like once a day or something. But to gain control of it, you have to sacrifice somebody else. You have to give it an offering or whatever. And so that's dangerous. And then the other one, which is more relevant for the current situation, is one that lets you switch bodies with somebody else for a temporary amount of time. And so he's like, yeah, I can get those. That's fine. And so she sends him back. And when he shows back up, the battle's already over. Everyone's like cheering. We get like a whole thing, a flashback with her using explosion, and they're carrying her around, cheering her, and she's talking about how great she is. There's a thing where Darkness comes up to check to make sure he's okay, and then she gets surrounded by guys because she's so hot, and she's sadomasochist, so she was out there like running right at like the general of the army and getting beat up or taking all these shots because it turns gets her juices flowing, which is why she has all her points like defense and is a crusader. And then she's embarrassed by that, but they drag her off. Aqua comes by and it's like, hey, you're good, bye. And then she leaves and like, fuck you guys. So then he starts leaving, and then Megumi's like, no, help me. They want me to do advanced magic. I don't know any advanced magic. So we have him carrying her on his back, Megumi, back to his room, and he's like, I just wanted to stay. She's like, it's time to go. I just want to be with my friends and have adventures and do stuff. He's like, yeah, whatever, fuck it. So they go to the room, and he throws her on his bed, and she's like, wow, this is really nice. I see where you want to stay. And he's like, yeah, the food's so good, and this and that, and it's so, oh goodness. And then the princess shows up, and she's like, my hero, Oni-chan. And he's like, oh, hey, little sister. And Megumi's like, I'm right here, because they're giving like googly eyes to each other, being like, ah. And then she gets up and comes over, and they're talking about like this necklace that she has, and she's like, I don't know, it's like a treasure my brother had, and then he like disappeared, and he left to do whatever bullshit adventure he's going to do, and he left it with me, but like no one knows what it actually does because it's got some mystic, like it's got some like mystical language on the back that no one can read. And she flips it over, and Cosimo's like, oh, it's Japanese, let me read it. And he's like, what's yours is mine, and mine is yours, something. And then like bam, we get like a first person perspective from the princess, and she's just staring at Cosima. And if you're not retarded, you know exactly what just happened. They switch bodies, and Megumi's like, what's going on? Why are you guys just staring at each other? I'm sitting right here. Stop being weird. And then the princess, who is now Princess Cosima, is like, hey, so we switched bodies. And then Cosima Iris is like, oh my gosh. And so then we get like a whole, hilarity ensues with that situation. But then they decide, the princess like really, 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 who's the princess possessing Cosima's body, is like really, 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 really wants to go on adventures. And so Megumi is like, all right, or because Cosima remembers that like, oh, this is like, it's a temporary thing. It should just like go away after a little bit. There's no way to really break. It's not like a curse, just temporarily. Anyway, so Princess Iris, or Cosima Iris, wants to go on an adventure. So Megumi takes her into the city to like do that, and Cosima Princess is like, I don't know about that. Anyway, so he starts wandering around being a princess, and he's like loving it. He's like, what's up? How you doing? Doing great. You looking good? And then the lady who's like always following the princess around is like, are you okay? You seem kind of weird. And she's like, no, I'm fine. And then she starts bad-mouthing Cosima, and the Cosima who's possessing the princess is like, you got to cut that shit out. He's great. She's like, oh. And then the isekai guy with the cursed sword rolls up, and he's like, oh, princess, something. And he's like patting her head, and you can tell that like the princess's guard and this guy have like a thing for each other. And then Cosima Princess is like noticing this, and then he's like, I need this man executed for touching my hair without permission. And then everyone like freaks out, and she's like, I'll let it go if you get the fuck out of here and don't come back. And he's like, ah! And he runs off. And then the lady's like, you're really acting weird. And then something, she's like, where's Darkness? Where's Lady La Latina or whatever? And she's like, oh, she's in the bath. And then Cosima, again, because Darkness is a banger, is like, ooh, I want to go wash her back to reward her for the whole thing. And she's like, what? And she's like, and I'll wash her back too. That's fine. And then this woman gets like super turned on by that or whatever. And Cosima Princess is like, ruh-roh. So we head to the bath, and La Latina's already like dressed. And he's like, oh, look at those, like a nice rack. And meanwhile, as soon as they get there, the guard's like stripping naked or getting down to like her undies. and getting in the bath already. And then, Cosmo Princess and Latina have like a little conversation. He's like, oh, I just wanted to thank you. Well, first of all, he's like, ooh, he's all flushed because like her massive tits are like barely being held in. And then she's like, okay. And it's like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to give you, I wanted to wash your back to reward you for like all the hard work. And then Darkness is like, oh, I can get back in the bath right now. And then she like bends over so you can get like a nice shot of her tits. And then the other guard comes over the guard lady comes over and she's got massive tits too. And Cosmo Princess is like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. I'm like frozen in joy. He's like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. Like I've literally taken a bath with Darkness before, which he has. But then he's like, I don't know if I can do this. It seems kind of wrong. And then we get like a shot of him like naked standing up. And he's like, no, I'm going to do what my ancient ancestors say, like seize the day. I can't remember exactly. That's not the quote. The quote is something like, just do today and don't worry, let tomorrow worry about tomorrow or some bullshit. And he's like, I'm doing it. And then he like comes back to and he's staring at like 4 massive boobs. And he's like, yes, let's do it. And he's like, now I see why this guy requested this power or this artifact when he came here. And his kind of one of his worries is that when they switch bodies, Princess or Cosima Lily will be like, what is that smell? Why do I smell like Darkness? And he's like, wait a second, that pervert. But at this point he's like, I don't care. This is so good. This is great. And then we go to Cosima, Iris, and Megumi in downtown in the capital. And Cosima Iris is getting the shit kicked out of her. Megumi's like taunting these like thugs, making fun of them. That's where the episode ends. So immediately the episode begins, episode 6, begins with the reversal. And so right when Cosmo was about to get his dream of having Darkness giant breasts and they rub her back while she's in the bath, he switches places. So instead of that, he goes right into being beat the shit out of by thugs and having to flee, while Iris is like, what is happening? And so he becomes a pariah immediately. And everyone's super mad at him. Darkness is super pissed. And they're essentially like, get the fuck out of here. And he's like, okay, I'll leave. Good stuff. Anyway, he's mourning his loss in his bedroom at night, the night before they're supposed to leave, when Chris shows back up, the thief. And she's like, you ready to do this? And then he's like, no, get the fuck out of here. And he's like, the princess has got this thing. Go for it if you want it. And she's like, I need your help. And he's like, no, I don't want to help. And she's like, it's just some stupid thing which lets you change bodies for like a little bit. And she's like, no, you don't understand. If one of the people is killed while you're body switch, then the other person stays that person forever. So essentially, it can make someone immortal. And he's like, oh yeah, that sounds a lot worse. And she's like, yes, that's why I need your help. So you're gonna come help me out. And finally, he's convinced, like, fine. So he puts on the mask he got from Doulahan earlier, and they go on like this super fun like thieving adventure. And at some point, Cosimo starts using like all his abilities because he's actually, even though he's like a rogue and everyone treats him like shit and thinks he's a piece of junk and he's lazy, he's very powerful because he's smart. And so he utilizes like all these different like random skills, like making water and turning water to ice and all this stuff to overcome a lot of people and to do a lot of good stuff. So they're sneaking into the castle, and then at some point they're getting into an argument because they're like tightly, like him and Chris are like really, really close to each other. And then she's like, get off me, get away from me. And he's like, I can't, there's not enough space. Calm down, stop screaming. And that alerts the guards. So once the guards alert, they start the chase. And then they run and they fight guards and they get away from them. And they get to like the next chamber, and the next chamber is like the princess's guard and the mages and stuff and some more elite guard. And so they take care of them. Like similarly, they just kind of trick them, do this. The isekai guy, hero with like the cursed sword shows up, and Cosmo beats the shit out of him again by like waterboarding him essentially, and that gets the guard lady to go, no, help, and then they run away and they get to like the final chamber where the princess is at, and when they open the door, Darkness is there, and so he slams the door shut right in the middle of Darkness's like ridiculous speech, and she's like, hey, that's rude, blah blah blah, and Chris is like, what are we gonna do? And he's like, let's just go. So he opens it up, and then Darkness is there, and the princess is like, I'm from the line of warriors, and she has like a little cute sword and everything, and then Megumi's there, and he's like, Jesus Christ. And so he binds Megumi in Darkness, and then Aqua like undoes the spell, and she's like barely functional, drunk, and she's like, there's nothing you can do, your magic's useless because I can just spell everything. And he's like, God damn it, Aqua, what the fuck? And then they kind of dodge past Darkness because remember, this hasn't come up yet in this season, so it's established that Darkness is only defensive. Like her ability to swing the sword and hit something is like, it's super embarrassing. So Chris and Cosimo like run past her, like literally run right next to her, and she can't hit them with the broadside, like with her sword. She couldn't hit the broadside of her bomb. And because Kazuma's being such like a middle school Japanese boy with his like mask and his uniform and just like the stuff he's saying, that Megumi is like in love immediately with him. Because he's so cool. Oh my gosh, the stuff he's saying, it's so awesome. His uniform's awesome. Oh my gosh. And so she's whatever. And then Chris and Kazuma use their powers combined, their stealing powers combined, to steal the necklace and a ring that the princess has. And then they burst out of there, and then Aqua casts some crazy spell and they dive into the water. Later, Darkness approaches them, or Darkness is like beating them up, or has them like pinned down because she at some point realized, or found out that it was Kazuma and her, and they were explaining like the whole thing, and she's like, you got to tell me this stuff, you can't just surprise me, blah blah blah, I'm more mad about this than anything else. And then they go before the princess, and they don't tell him everything that's going on, but they explain like what the thing does, and then the guard lady like berates Kazuma for not being around to help out that evening, and he's like, oh my gosh. And then they find out that before this happens, Darkness explains that so Kazuma stole the ring that the princess had, and we find out that the ring is only to be given by the princess to the man that she's supposed to marry, and as soon as whatever hero defeats the Demon King will have that ring, and then that'll like tie them together forever. And so Kazuma's like, oh, this is awesome. And he's like, well, just give it back. And he's like, you can't have it back. If you give it back, then people are going to find out you have it, and then they're going to murder you. He's like, jeez. Or they're going to execute you. So he's like, all right, I'll hold on to it. Fine. So they have this whole thing in the courtroom in the palace, where it seems like the princess knows that Kazuma's the thief, kind of, and he wants to tell him, and the Megumi's all hot and bothered about it too, so he really wants to reveal it to everybody, but Darkness won't let him, and then Aqua's like, you're acting weird, and it goes back and forth and back and forth. Finally, they're like, all right, whatever, we're leaving. And then they're out front of the palace, like leaving and saying goodbye, and the princess is like, I have something I want to tell you, and then she goes off about like the thief and handsome and brave, and then calling him a big brother and saying, I miss you, big brother, and I'm so excited. And then Megumi gets jealous, and they start arguing back and forth and fighting about that, and then finally Kazuma stops them, and he's like, hey, okay, princess, what do you want to say? And she's like, I really want you to come back and play with me. And you have this like ridiculous like romantic scene where her like there's like nice music, and like the wind's blowing through her hair and all this stuff, and Kazuma's like, ooh. It's so ridiculous. Anyway, meanwhile, they back home at Axel in their palace. He's laying on the ground moaning and being sad, and Darkness is like, take that shit outside, I'm so tired of listening to you whine and complain. And he's like, whatever. And he's like, I got this ring, and like before you guys got involved, maybe the princess was going to ask me out or do something. And then Lalatino like laughs. She's like, why? She would never do that. Blah, 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 blah. You're a piece of shit. Why would you do that? And he's like, man, let me dream. And he like wanders off. And then we switch back to the princess, and her guard and the priestess lady or the wizard who hang out with her are like apologizing for the loss of the ring and all this stuff. And the princess is like, no, it's okay. It's fine. And then she says something about like, as soon as, I hope that, well, she's thinking, I hope that as soon as my hero defeats the Demon King, comes back, we can be together, and that him having the ring will bring us closer together. Isn't that right, big brother? Oh, so she does know. She knows for a fact. It's Kazuma. They're on the same page, but everyone is not going to let that happen. Wah, wah, wah. In episode 7, we get the development of several things without actually anything really happening or going. So it starts off, and everyone's cheering and celebrating that Kazuma finally got his like 3 million drachma or whatever it is in this fantasy isekai world from like defeating whatever he was defeating before. He also in this episode gets his reward for he gets like the payment, which is another giant sack of gold from not the dual hands, the mask guy and Wiz for inventing the fire starter kits or whatever, and then selling them while they were, it's their share of the profit or whatever, coming up with the idea and developing it and all that stuff. So fun times had by all. So Kazuma's living the dream at this point. There's like a whole scene where they're like in a restaurant, just being ridiculous, and it's played up for chuckles. Like it's like this fancy restaurant, and they're talking about things, and the chef's like, I don't know, I have no idea what you're talking about. When they return home, they find Darkness being tortured by Megumi, and as we know, Darkness is a sadomasochist, so they're like, okay, well, whatever weird sexual thing you guys are into, we're just going to leave you alone and let you do it. And they freak out and like, no. And then finally Kazuma and Agua come back in, And then Darkness is like, oh, I feel so strong. And there's like a competition to see who's got the most endurance out of the Crusaders, something. And, I'm just getting my heat resistances up and all this stuff. She's like, all right, I'm ready. Let me go. And Cosmo's like, whoa, how the tables have turned. And we get a quick flashback to like when they were at the castle and he was kind of tied up and they were like berating him or like torturing him essentially. And he's like, time to go. And so we found out that she's like all flushed and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you took advantage. And he's like, whatever, man, I just tickled you until you passed out. Like, good stuff. She then has like a sense of foreboding. Oh, we also learned that Aqua bought like a quote unquote dragon egg from some shady merchant when she was home alone, and Cosmo's like, Jesus Christ. And so she spends a lot of this episode being upset that she's not home raising her dragon egg. Instead she's doing all this bullshit with these guys. Like they go out to they're like, oh, we don't do any quests. We can just chill, relax, enjoy ourselves. Darkness gets like she gets kind of a dark premonition about stuff and is concerned about going home visiting her father. And they go to visit when they pick up the money from Wiz, the Lich, and the mask guy, which I can't remember his name. He's like, oh, let me do I feel ill omens from you. Let me do a reading for you. And so he sits her down in front of this like crystal and he starts asking her like really personal questions. Then he calls her out when she's a liar, like, why are you wearing less armor? And she's like, oh, to increase my agility. He's like, liar. She's like, I was getting too much muscle and I like my sexy frame. And then something about like, why do you do this? And she's like, and he's like, in reality, what you really want is just to run away and like elope with this gentleman. And he'd ask you to do it, but he's too much of a chicken shit because he's concerned that like you're going to reject him. And they're like, ah! And then she's like, how is this helping with my fortune? And he's like, fortune? I was just asking you some questions. It's nothing to do with reading your fortune. And so she freaks out. And then he reads her fortune and he's like, oh, there's like ill omens ahead for you and your father. And you're going to like sacrifice yourself and it's not going to go the way you think or whatever. And then she's like, I got to go. And so she leaves. And then we see Cosmo fishing and he's thinking because the guy was like saying stuff to him too, giving him like a quick read. And he's like, oh, hey, there's you can't affect the future if you do like this thing and whatever. And Cosmo's like fishing and thinking about it. We then go to the house and Darkness is like, I'm going to go out. Cosmo's like, okay, bye. So she wanders off and then comes back like early the next morning. And he's like, he makes fun of her for being like a young single woman out by herself at night. And then she's like, hey, I got a quest. It's this ridiculous like 10 skulls quest to kill this Hydra. And it's like worth 5 million gold pieces or whatever. And he's like, I got enough money. I'm not going to do it. And she's like, I'll give you a reward. And he's like, what could you possibly give me as a reward? And she's like, I'll kiss you on the cheek. And it's like a pause. And he starts laughing and he's playing with the cat. And he's like, all right, get the fuck out of here. I'm not going to do that stupid shit. And then she comes over and like kneels in front of him and like begs with like crocodile tears. And he's like, oh, fine, fuck it. So then they drag Agua out of there because, of course, she never wants to do anything. And they're like, hey, just purify the water. We'll get the Hydra out of here. And then Megumi will blast it with an explosion magic and it'll be great. So Agua goes out there, but then she falls asleep. And they're like trying to wake her up. But because the water's purified, the Hydra's upset because monsters like dirty water in this world. And so it comes up and grabs her. And then they're like, oh, shit, fuck. And Megumi's like, I can't do explosion. She's right there. No. That's the end of the episode. We pick up in heaven again. Cosmo's hanging out with Eris, and then he gets resurrected. And we find out that he was eaten by the Hydra, and that Darkness went in to rescue him, and then Megumi blasted the Hydra, and then they were able to like get Cosmo's body out. Now he's naked because the saliva or whatever from inside the Hydra like acided away all his clothes except for like his sword, which hasn't really come up this season. And then we still don't get like a firm confirmation about what's going on with Darkness. We just find out that destroying this Hydra thing is very important to her, and it's like the rainy season, so the Hydra is constantly regenerating because it regenerates in water. So we also at some point they go back to the guild right after not defeating the Hydra to try to see if they can get some of the reward, and they find out that the reason that the thing was put out in the first place is because normally the King's Guard would come out and deal with it, like the knights, because it's such a big threat, but that they're caught up trying to find like the silver-haired thief, which is just Chris and Kasuma. And so he's like, ruh-roh. And the reward's like $500 million or whatever to get back all these like artifacts that have been stolen. And he's like, I'm just going to go hide out because everyone in the town's like, oh, they used a fortune teller and found out that they're currently like in this area. And he's like, ruh-roh. So him and Aqua are just like hanging out inside. Aqua's still like loving on her maybe dragon egg, but most likely not. she's like instilling it with her holy power and doing all this crazy stuff. Meanwhile, Darkness and Megumi come up with this plan to defeat the Hydra. Just going to keep going and whacking at it and hoping that eventually they drain its magic down. So they do that for a while. It's similar to the scene from the first season where Megumi and Kazuma go and blow up the Dullahan's castle a bunch of times. And, they're like dancing and like, he's carrying her back. So it's the same thing, but with Darkness and Megumi. And they're just not getting anywhere. And then one day, Megumi comes storming in and is like, help, Darkness is running off on her own. Or someone's like, where's Darkness? Like, oh, she must be going off to fight the Hydra on her own. What the fuck's her deal? And so Kazuma's like, hey, you guys go. I'm gonna, I got something to take care of. I'll meet up with you. So Aqua and Megumi are trying to drag Darkness down to make sure she doesn't go fight the Hydra by herself. And then Kazuma shows up with like all the adventurers in the whole town and everybody. And then they go and they create this like very elaborate trap. And then the rest of the episode is just them fighting the Hydra. It's pretty good. So the Hydra's gigantic. It's a bunch of heads, whatever. They get all the mages together to like power Megumi with her explosion magic. They get, and Union's around. Good old Union. We haven't seen her all season. She's fantastic. We get like the craftsman guilds. We get this whole thing. So the plan is they entrap all the heads in like this very strong wire rope, and then they cook it, and they're trying to drag the Hydra out of the water because while it's in the water, it'll keep regenerating. And then they launch Kazuma onto its back, and he has like a lot of like thief skills, which are like drain. I think he's draining like evade or drain dodge or something is what he's saying. Just kind of making him worse and making it easier to hit. And to pull, like he's draining the stats from the Hydra like constantly, like just do. And then at some point Kazuma falls off the Hydra, and the Hydra's about to roll on top of him, and the Darkness runs over and like is protecting him. And they have like a nice little moment there where he's still draining it, and Darkness is like using her massive strength to like hold the Hydra up so it's not crushing Kazuma. And then one of his adventurers, they finally get it kind of like down on the ground, and one of the adventurers is like, I got this, I'm gonna go get the reward, and he runs off and gets eaten immediately. And so you has to cut off that head. And then they finally got the Hydra out of the water, so then Megumi is able to utilize all the magical powers she's being instilled with and cast like a giant explosion magic and destroying the Hydra. And then everyone splits the reward equally, and they're all celebrating afterwards. And super happy. And the Darkness and Kazuma are chatting, and he's like, I bet you're pretty happy we finally killed that Hydra. And she's like, yeah, but hanging out with everybody, I realized there's more important things than like destroying the Hydra or whatever, protecting the town. It's like all these people, something. So then like the next day or later that evening or something, Aqua, Megumi, and Kazuma come home or come into like the main room, and Darkness isn't around, and they find a letter, and the letter is like, hey, I'm sorry to spring this on you guys. It's been great. I've had a great time adventuring with you. Go ahead and find another like frontline fighter because I gotta go and take care of stuff. And always remember, you guys, I miss you. Dun dun dun. So of course the crew's not gonna let her just meander off and do whatever she wants. They're standing outside the gates of her palace, shouting, "Darkness, darkness, darkness!" And then the butler comes out. He's like, "Please, you must leave." And Aqua tries to bribe him, and he's like, "The fuck do you think your pennies can do to me? I'm not gonna take no bribe." And then he summons the guards, and they get chased off. We get distracted from the whole La Latina experience as Kazuma has kind of given up, and he's going off to find like a frontline adventurer so they can keep working because he doesn't want to do manual labor anymore like when they started in the first season. And Megumi's giving him a hard time, and he's like, whatever. So they go to the guild, and then we get like the after effect where he's like, thanks a lot for sabotaging the whole thing. And then we do like a flashback to like the stuff we missed, and he's interviewing somebody who seems really interested in being a part of the party. Then Megumi does like her crazy like, I am the chaos sorcerer, the crazy explosion lady, and the guy's like, oh, I'm done with that shit, fuck this. And sorry about that, my phone fell. So she's like, fuck this. And then no one will talk to him anymore, so he's super bummed out about that. As he's arguing with Megumi, I can't remember his name, the blonde guy who got eaten by a Hydra in the last episode. He's in and out. He's one of the like kind of more predominant side characters, I guess. Not predominant, he's like second tier after Union and Wiz and stuff. Anyway, so he's like, hey, I need some help. And then he explains to Kazuma that his partner, Rem, I think is her name, has been being harassed by like a nobleman of some sort, and that he's concerned for her because the guy seems like kind of a creep. So they track down the mansion, and then they sneak inside, and they hear him talking about wanting to do all this lewd stuff and take pictures and all this stuff. And it's very ambiguous, but it seems like he's trying to like really perv on her. And she's like, no, I refuse. Like that, we can't do that. We're gonna do something else. You're a noble. It doesn't make sense. Something. And then they're hiding, and Rem and the noble like run off. So then Kazuma and the guy, they go inside the room and they find some like sexy lingerie, and then the dude's like, I'm gonna protect Rem we're gonna use up all the film in this camera. And so then they have like a very sexy photo shoot where the guy's dressed in like the sexy lingerie, and it gets like really out of hand. And right when they're kind of finishing up with it, it's like a little much. Like this guy had a lot of sexy poses with like this red lingerie. But right as they're finishing up, Rem and the nobles step back in, and then we get the traditional Kazuma like on his knees begging for forgiveness, and she's like, the fuck are you guys doing here? And then they're kind of explaining it when the nobleman's like, oh, you came and you're dressed like this. He's like, of course I am. And then Rem's like, fuck it, whatever, let's go, Kazuma. And she takes him out, and then we find out that the nobleman is like hot and gay for this guy, like super hot and gay. He doesn't care, he's a nobleman. And the guy gets himself in deeper because he doesn't quite understand what's going on, and he's talking the way he's talking to the nobleman is like kind of sexual, like accidentally sexual. It's very well written, I would say, because it was like hilarious. And so then, like, they hear, like, him screaming, and then Rem and, I think her name's Ren, and Kazuma, they're like, well, moving on with our day. And then at some point, Rem's like, hey, I got some more information on a different noble. And he's like, I don't want any more to do with your fucking nobles and like whatever weird shit you guys are into. And she's like, no, it's about darkness. I found out, the rumor is that she's engaged to be married to like this guy. And he's like, what? So then he goes and talks to Aqua and Megumi about it. And he's like, we have to talk to darkness. So Agua gives him a bunch of blessings, including one that's like performance perk or whatever. And he's like, the fuck's that for? Anyway, so he sneaks into the castle and he ends up using the performance perk like a lot because it allows him like to perfectly replicate voices. And so he's able to sneak into La Latina's room doing that and then pretend to be her when she summons the guards and all that. And they have like a conversation. And then at some point they're sitting there on the bed, like, and she puts her hand on his hand, and then she looks at him with like her rosy cheeks, and she's like, if I have to get married to this guy, I don't want him to be my first. And then she like takes his hand and puts it on her abs, and then Cosmo's like, wow, your abs are shredded. And so she gets the shit out of him. And then someone backs the guards, and poor Cosmo, I can't get a break. And then there's like a chase sequence essentially where he's hiding and they're running after him, trying to find him. And she's like, if you come out, I'm going to beat the shit out of you. But it's going to be so much worse if you don't come out and I track you down. She's like super pissed about all this stuff and all the things he's saying about her insecurities to like all the house staff. Anyway, so Cosmo accidentally ends up in her father's room, and then he's like, oh, my bad. And then the father essentially explains the situation in that like he came into debt, and then he got sick, and then he can't get healed because magic can't heal like normal illnesses in this world, and it can't resurrect people who die of natural causes. Sure. And that what he wants is for Cosmo to essentially elope with darkness and run away, and then he's going to sell the mansion and use that to pay off the debt, and that way darkness doesn't have to be punished for like his mistakes or whatever. And then at that point, La Latina or darkness comes rolling in with the guards, and they yell at each other, and then he's like, whatever, fuck you, I'm done with this. If you don't want help, then like we're not going to help you. Like, you're going to be a dumb bitch. And then he goes to like jump out the window, which he's done several times, but this time the window's like super strong, and the whole window like collapses out, and he's like in a lot of pain, and darkness is like trying not to laugh at him. He's like, whatever, fuck you. And so then he runs off to the mansion, and he like falls again, and he gets in, and Aqua and Megumi are like passed out. And he's like, Aqua, help, I need healing. That's the end of the episode. Cosmo seems to have given up on helping darkness, but Aqua and Megumi have not. And they come up with the most crazy-ass ways to do it. So Megumi writes a threatening letter where a demon lord is going to use explosion magic to blow up the church during the ceremony if it's not canceled. And when that's brought to Cosmo and Agua, they throw her under the bus, and she goes to jail for 3 days. Agua, on the other hand, is doing performances in front of the manor and such, and they keep going to Cosmo, and Cosmo keeps dragging them out of trouble and keep talking about, like, no, I'm not going to do anything until darkness comes to see us. Meanwhile, he's working on bubble wrap. He's just working on bubble wrap. It goes back and forth to this for a little bit, and before Megumi kind of figures out while lecturing him or whatever that he has thought of every possible way to rescue her, to get her out of this situation, but hasn't been able to come up with anything, and so he's kind of resigned to his fate. She gets this because he starts talking about her being a noble and them not being nobles, and like what that actually means and what they can actually do and whatnot. After she leaves, our friend Mask shows up, and he talks about this crazy thing. Wiz always has like these absolutely terrible ideas about how to make money. And so he shows up, and Kazuma's showing him like ways to make money and all this stuff, and the mask guy's like, I have this giant bag of money. I will give you this giant bag of money for all of this intellectual property. And Kazuma's like, nah, it's worth more than that. And then he's like, well, how about we talk about your little friend? Because this part of this demon's ability is just knowing things. And so we learn that previously they fought like this giant spider robot crazy thing. I think in season 2. And then it caused all these problems. And there was like a flood that Agua caused. And because of that, even though they defeated it, they got like no bounty from the quest because they had caused so much problems they had to pay back. But that what they paid back did not cover all the damages. And that the guy who was in charge of this area, the guy who's going to marry Darkness, because he would not help them, the people turned to what is it, like Duke Dustiness, which is Darkness's dad, and that he went into debt to help all these people, right? And so it's literally their fault. I mean, it's like one of those, like, it's their fault, but also they saved everybody kind of bullshit things. Anyway, and then finally Kazuma's like, and then Aqua comes in and she turns the demon into dust with like her holy magic, and then he comes back and he's, they chit chat, and then Kazuma hits Aqua in the head, is like, shut the fuck up, and trying to figure something out. And so eventually we find out that the cost to pay back the debt is literally all the money that Kazuma has and all the money in the bag. And it's like, that crafty fucking devil. Right? And so he's like, all right, let's do this. And then we go over to La Latina, and she is getting ready for the wedding, and the asshole noble tries to come in, and the guard like stops him, and she's like so grateful, and she looks so beautiful, and something about being ravished and all this stuff. And she's thinking about her friends and if they're going to be there or whatnot. There's like a big ceremony in a giant church, and there's all the nobles and all the people in town and everything. And she's walking up, and they're like, oh, we have this special priest just for you. And they get up there, and it's this like girl with pink hair and a mask, and she starts insulting the noble, being like, he's a fat old fuck and he's dirty and all this stuff. And he's like, how dare you? And then she like takes off her mask, and she's like, whatever, fuck yourself, because it's Agua. And then when everyone's like stunned, Kazuma grabs Darkness by the arm, and the animation in this season is fantastic, by the way. It is so well done. And kind of takes her down the aisle a ways, and then turns around, and then we get like an over talk where he's like, dear mom and dad, today I went to rescue a noble lady. And something. And that's where the episode wraps up. So the final episode of season 3 continues at breakneck speed. There seems to be some confusion within my head, because the nobleman is like, you can't take my bride. If you're going to take my bride, you have to pay me back like the 2 billion, whatever. And then Kazuma's like, is that a promise? And the guy's like, what? Yeah, of course. If you pay me 2 billion, you can buy the wife for me or whatever. And so then Kazuma runs over and pushes over this face, and 2 billion heiress or whatever they're called break out and fall out. And then he's like, there you go, she's mine now. And then they take off. And then this guy starts chasing after him. He calls his guard in. He calls like a big gorilla guy. And then Yun blasts him from behind with like some super powerful lightning magic. And then Megumi starts using explosion magic, because that was like her plan the whole time, and she wasn't involved with like Aqua and Kazuma's plan, because why would they coordinate? Anyway, there's a whole back and forth with like the guards running this way and running that way, Kazuma using his like special powers to make like the sound of the noble to get the guards to go somewhere else, him chasing them back, them going back and forth and back and forth. Eventually they break out, and then the noble eventually explosion goes off, destroys a whole swath of stuff, and then everyone's standing around like quietly for a second, and then the bad guy noble is like, hey, adventurers, I will pay you all this money if you capture Darkness. And they all just like, they're going to do something else, because they like Darkness, right? And they're all like a big family here in the guild and everything like that. And so then he sends his guards afterwards, and then the adventurers actually like beat the shit out of the guards, and they make an excuse. Like one of them like falls over and he's like, oh, you stepped on my arm, you broke it. And then the guard's like, what? We didn't do anything. And then the other guy's like, you saying my friend's a liar? So it's pretty good. So they beat all the guards up, and then the big guy's like all pissed off, the nobleman, but they get away without any problems. We then go to, where does we go to next? Then we go to the Dustinus home, and we got Agua. Everyone's showing up, and the old man's like dying, and Darkness and him are crying, and Kazuma comes up, and he's like, you're such a good boy. Please take care of my daughter, like marry her and take care of her and all that stuff. And there's like a whole running gag in this episode where it's like he bought Darkness, so like now they're married or whatever. And all that good stuff. And then there's like a thing at the end with like marriage contracts I didn't quite understand, where she's like a widower now because the guy disappears. Anyway, I'll get to that. Anyway, so the guy's like dying while Latina's crying, he's crying, everyone's crying, and then Agua's like, blah, and like shocks him real hard, and then he like wakes up and he's totally fine. And she's like, he was cursed. And they're like, what? It's cursed because going all the way back, this show is so well written. This light novel, it's so fantastic. So if you remember, we had this whole conversation about the body swapping artifact and then the demon summoning artifact. And so the bad guy noble used the demon summoning artifact to summon a demon to curse this guy, and now the curse is broken. And then the guy's yelling at the demon and blah 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 blah, and he's like, "You have to go get Lalatina for me." And then like we hear a voice that sounds like her being like, "Oh, I'm here." And then he like opens the door. He's like, "All right, your contract's fulfilled. You're good to go." To the demon. And then right after that happens, Lalatina or darkness or whatever transforms into the masked demon, and he's like, suck it, bitch. And the guy's like, what? And then he's like, back and forth, and he's like, you servant, do what you do. And he's like, your contract's up. He's gonna fuck you up now and he's gonna get what you told him you would give him. And remember, if we remember back, there's like a price to be paid, and that price is like the emotions. And the demon Duke, the Duke demon, who is like the master of, I don't know, lies or something. He who did the curse, his whole thing is he relishes the emotion of like pain, essentially. And so he starts breaking this guy up. And then the masked guy's like, oh, this is below my interest. I like fear. I don't like this like painful emotion. So I'm going to adios. And when you get done here, my friend, the other demon, well, I'll take you back to like the demon kingdom or whatever, and then we'll be good to go. And I'll go back to my shop with the crazy lich. And so then we have the crew. They're all packed and ready to go. And Darkness is like, hey, that guy disappeared and no one knows what happened to him. So I guess he's done. And so we can stay and be happy and live together and like, awesome. And they're like, all right, let's go inside our house. And Darkness is standing there, and they have this whole back and forth about, oh, that's right, she quit because of her stupid letter. And like, hey, man, you can come join our party again. And then she's like, no, I officially want to join your party. Something like, yeah, come on, dumbass. There's a whole cute moment, too, in the church earlier, I just remembered, where she calls him like a dumbass, and he's like, if I'm a dumbass, you're like a dumb bitch. It's so funny. This episode is so good. It's so funny and so well written and cutesy and stuff, and I really enjoyed it. And it's curious to see what happens next. I'm assuming there'll be a fourth season / like fifth season, because we started off and then we had like a Megumi centered like story arc, and this is like a Darkness centered story arc. So I wonder if there's like an Agua centered story arc next. But yeah, the episode just ends with everyone being happy, everything going back to normal. We see Chris getting the artifact to summon the demon secretly, in like a kind of like a montage at the end, and they're just talking about how he's going to get all his money back, and he's like super excited about that, and he just wants to chill and do nothing. So now he's like super rich, and super excited and everything. And yeah, this show's excellent. So season 3 continues to be excellent. Everything about this is excellent. There was part of like the Megumi side story I wasn't like a super big fan of. I feel like it's like the whole four humors concept, which if you're not familiar with, you can look it up online. Just look up like four humors in media. It's like the Ninja Turtles, Seinfeld. It's like this whole theory where it's like you have these four characters that kind of all have certain personality types, like match really well in how we conceptualize like humor and everything else. And so when you just have Megumi doing Megumi stuff like Yun Yun, I just don't feel like it's as in sync as when you have all four of these guys playing off each other, which is really good. But yeah, excellent. Highly recommend if you haven't seen this and you got this far, if somehow you just listen to me rant about this for however long for all these seasons. It's so good. The whole thing's so good. I'd watch it all again like tomorrow. It's so fantastic all around. And yeah, thoroughly enjoyed. And I think next up, I'm going to watch Monster, which is like a psychological thriller. So we see how, I'll see how that goes. But yeah, cool. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe, and I will catch y'all later. Bye.